Hey there, and welcome back to another Genshin Impact character review. Today, we're taking a look at our first Dendro character for this series, and our first ever Dendro 5-star, Tighnari. So, Tighnari is our first Dendro 5-star. We got, of course, the Dendro MC and Collei, but I wanted to focus on Tighnari because he's the character that I actually liked compared to the Dendro main character. I'm gonna call him DMC for short. Devil May Cry, and Collei because I didn't give a flying fuck about Collei. So I pulled for Tighnari because I mostly didn't want to do Dendro puzzles with those characters. So I got Tighnari, and I have to say that, well, I'm not exactly surprised. I thought he was gonna be a pretty decent character, but I genuinely liked what we got. He's not anything groundbreaking even for our first Dendro 5-star, but I think he's definitely in a very, very good spot. He has very Ganyu style gameplay, but he is unique in his own ways, so he stands out very much. You know, you can make the comparison to Ganyu, but he plays in his own way. And also, since he is the first Dendro character I'm gonna be covering, I'll go a bit more into depth about Dendro in general, so this video might be a bit longer than it should be, but hey, I want to talk about Dendro a lot because if you've seen like leaks and stuff, we aren't getting any Dendro characters actually in like 1 to 2 patches. So yeah, I don't want to make a separate video about Dendro in general, so I think Tighnari's video can definitely, we'll cover it here. So let's begin. First, let's take a look at Tighnari's attacks. I mentioned that he's very Ganyu style, so he's a bow character, he's a Dendro bow. His normal attacks are normal attacks, of course, he's a bow character, he just throws his arrows. But his charge attacks are the main thing, where Tighnari can charge his bow shot 2 times, like Ganyu, and he fires off a Wraith Arrow, as it's called, where when the Wraith Arrow hits something, either an object or, the ground, an object, or an enemy, it will then split and then fire off extra homing shots, somewhat like Yoimiya's full charged shots, which I don't know why they gave her that. But yes, the idea is like half Ganyu, half Yoimiya, where you have the 2 levels of charge attacks like Ganyu, but the effect is like Yoimiya, where you gain the extra homing shots. These can deal a lot of damage, but the big thing is that they are all separate instances of spread. The Electro plus Dendro thing, where you get the enemy to go to the quickened state, and then you hit them with more Dendro, and they take extra damage like Vaporize and Melt. All of these shots can proc Quicken, and the Wraith Arrow itself, so it's really, really good on those team comps, and it can deal a lot of damage, and it's pretty nice that they're homing. But yes, those are Tighnari's attacks. The main thing mostly for Tighnari, I want to say that they kind of feel slow, they kind of feel slow to charge up, but I don't have any experience with Ganyu. I don't own Ganyu, nor have I used Ganyu in any friend's account or something. And I can't exactly, get the feeling that maybe there is a difference to their charging timers. Like, I feel like Ganyu does get her second charge attack a bit faster, but again, I don't have experience, so they could easily be the same. But because this is my first time with a double charge attack thingy, I feel like it's kind of sluggish. That's my only real note about Tighnari's charge attacks. They kind of feel slow, but again, only to a newcomer to this type of gameplay. Let's move on to his skill now. So, Tighnari's skill is that he throws a Dendro Bomb thingy, which creates a small field that taunts enemies. So it's kind of like Mona's taunt, Ganyu's skill, so you see more same skills there. But like every other taunt, it taunts enemies into that radius and they start attacking the air, basically. It applies Dendro when it hits the enemies. It deals an okay amount of damage, but the big thing about this skill is that you gain an effect on Tighnari where it reduces the time it takes to charge his attacks, and it basically makes the level 2 instant. So you can instantly fire off level 2 charge attacks and, proc the Wraith Arrows. You can do this up to 3 charged attacks or until the duration ends if you threw out your skill and needed to change it to another character. So it's not something that leaves Tighnari when he's off the field, when he leaves the field. It's a duration thing, or when you fire 3 arrows. This is a very big thing. The skill has a decent cooldown as well, so you can easily throw out the skill, throw out your burst or throw out your charge attacks first, and then switch to your, do your rotation, and then back to Tighnari for another 3 charge attacks. A very quick, a very low field time character Tighnari becomes with this skill, and it's really nice, really good. I like this thing, and I really like the 3 charge attack that he shoots really quickly. Like, again, with this thing, it makes it feel even more sluggish when you need to do 1 more charge attack perhaps to finish off an enemy. Let's move on to his burst then. So Tighnari's burst is very simple. He fires off a giant arrow which, when it hits an enemy or an object, splits into more arrows that also home in. So it's basically a level 2 charge attack, but amped up to be a burst. It has a 40 energy cost, which is very low and very welcome since we don't have any crazy Dendro batteries, around. But it's a really, really good burst. Deals a lot of damage, and all of those arrows as well can also proc spread. So again, it's a nuke in a way, but has a bit more depth into it that makes it deal even more damage than a just single damage nuke. And again, the 40 energy cost is just extremely welcome, which makes Tighnari basically ult every time he's on the field, or every second time when he's on the field if he has a bit of energy recharge. So extremely welcome, I have to say. As for Ascension talents, there aren't any that tie into his abilities, like when he casts an ability like something happens. His first Ascension talent is that when Tighnari fires off a charge attack, he gains an Elemental Mastery buff. That's cool. And his second Ascension talent, which is a very big one, is that for every point of Elemental Mastery that Tighnari has, he increases the damage of his charge attacks and his burst. So this pushes a lot of power into the charge attack and the burst first of all, but also pushes a lot of the build towards Elemental Mastery, but it isn't an absolute thingy. It isn't something like a Nemo character where you build them with EM just for swirl, right? It's that you can give him an Elemental Mastery Sands and some Elemental Mastery substats, and he deals a good amount of damage. And let's immediately go into artifacts. So there are 3 sets that are fit for Tighnari. First is Wanderer's Troop and Gilded Dreams. Gilded Dreams is the new one, which is all about Elemental Mastery and attack when you have like the different or same characters in the party. And Wanderer's Troop is Wanderer's Troop. So these are both very same. Gilded Dreams gives you more EM, so that, deals more spread damage, and then, his second Ascension talent gives him more of a boost. But Wanderer's Troop is also amazing because it has Elemental Mastery as well, and then the 35% charge attack damage is very good, so that's how it ties in with the Gilded Dreams in terms of DPS. And the third set is Deepwood Memories, the one you farm with Gilded Dreams. If Tighnari is on his own on a team, if you're not planning on using Cole or DMC, and you're waiting on another Dendro character to come around that is very good with Tighnari, Deepwood Memories is by far the best set. It seriously performs much better than Wanderer's Troop and Gilded Dreams because it's, 15% Dendro damage, and then it's basically swirl on Dendro, where your skills and bursts reduce Dendro res of an enemy. Now, I want to say that it's not necessary that a Dendro character must carry Deepwood Memories, because it's not tied to Dendro-related stuff. The 4-piece effect is that if skills and bursts hit opponents, they get a Dendro res reduction. So you can easily fit Deepwood Memories on any character that you put with Tighnari. So if you have some sort of suitable character that can carry Deepwood Memories and very reliably use it, you can use Deepwood Memories on that character and stick with Wanderer's Troop and Gilded Dreams on Tighnari. And the big thing is that Wanderer's Troop, of course, if you're an old player, has been around for forever, and it's very likely that you have some really godlike artifacts on Wanderer's Troop, and of course, easily suitable ones, right? Until you farm an Elemental Mastery Sense, perhaps, that is good on Gilded Dreams and Deepwood Memories, that's gonna take time, while you already have one that's good on Wanderer's Troop. So, until you get yourself a good Deepwood Memories or Gilded Dreams set for Tighnari, your godlike Wanderer's Troop artifacts are definitely gonna do a better job than, mid to low Power, Gilded Dreams, or again, Deepwood Memories. So that's it for artifacts. As for stats, EM and attack on your Sands of Eon are actually pretty equal, and since Elemental Mastery is a bit harder to come by, better stats on an attack Sands can definitely be better. I just run in with EM because I had a good EM Sands on my on Wanderer's Troop. Your Flowers and Feathers should also, prioritize crit stats, EM, and attack, of course. And then for Goblet and Circlet, well, until you get yourself a Dendro damage Goblet, which can definitely take a while, attack or EM are still very solid, but of course Dendro damage is much, much better for Tighnari. So, a really good EM or attack Goblet can definitely be a replacement until you find yourselves a Dendro damage one, because you now have to farm them, of course. They weren't available previously. As for Circlet, it's of course crit rate or crit damage based on what what stat you need the most, or if you have a really good, good crit rate Circlet with an amazing amount of crit damage, or crit damage Circlet with an amazing amount of crit rate. The standard stuff, I don't think I need to mention a lot there. So let's move on to team compositions. There's a pretty big one. There's the absolute #1 character that Tighnari basically always needs to have on his teams. And that is Fischl. Fischl is basically the Xingqiu or Yelan of Pyro DPS. She is that for Dendro characters. Her constant electro application through Oz, her basically no field time, and also her A4 passive, which constantly triggers when you have Quicken on an enemy and you proc Aggravate and Spread, make her absolutely a monster. With a Thundering Fury set, she's even more powerful, right? She gets cooldown reduction on Oz, she gets extra Aggravate damage. She is absolutely insane. And yeah, she's again like Xingqiu or Yelan. An absolute must for Dendro DPSs here. And there are definitely other characters that can be paired with Dendro characters and Tighnari, but they have their drawbacks, and Fischl is seriously by far absolutely broken with Dendro and its reactions, seriously. And with Tighnari, she's actually extremely powerful because Fischl as a bow character can get Elegy for the End, and Elegy for the End is absolutely insane for Dendro reactions and Aggravate and Spread. It gives a good amount of energy recharge to Fischl, it gives passive Elemental Mastery, and then it has the buff where it gives 100 EM on its first refinement and a good amount of attack, both of which Tighnari absolutely loves. And Fischl, of course, herself. Everybody gets the buff. There isn't an exception for the character that has Elegy for the End to not get the buff. Everybody gets it. So Fischl herself deals more damage through Aggravate and just in general. So yeah, Elegy for the End has become the absolute, also the Xingqiu and Yelan for Dendro characters, because it's just that good of a buff. The exact stats that a Dendro character or Electro character even would want on an Aggravate and Spread team. So Fischl with Elegy for the End is absolute gold-like combination. So yeah, and as for the drawbacks of other Electro characters, you can get someone like Yaemiko, but she needs a bit more field time that Tighnari would appreciate. Someone like Beidou, Tighnari would need to weave in some normal attacks in order to proc her burst. So there are these drawbacks. These characters can definitely work, but as I said, they cannot carry Elegy for the End also, so, that's why Fischl just absolutely breaks the boundaries on how useful she is for Dendro characters and Tighnari himself especially. So that's mostly for Electro characters. Hydro characters, the thing is that, Hydro and Pyro as well, Tighnari isn't exactly good with these teams. First of all, Bloom is a bit meh. Hydro Bloom, where you want to hit the cores with Electro. Officials like Oz doesn't exactly prioritize the Bloom cores, so they're his last target. So they you don't proc Hyper Bloom, and the amount of time it takes for Bloom to proc, it's way too much, right? Nilu is coming, which is Bloom related, but I don't think she'll be a good Tighnari Tighnari companion because she is an on-field character herself. Kokomi is okay because she does have good AoE Hydro application, but she is also kind of meh for Tighnari. You know, she offers healing, but that's about it. She doesn't really do something for Tighnari that he would really like. She can carry, Thrilling Tales, but it's not LNG for the end. Xingqiu is very single target and also would need the normal attacks, between charge attacks for Tighnari. That kind of stuff. Yelan as well, and, again, these kinds of things that other Electro characters also had as drawbacks compared to Fischl, only now you don't have a useful reaction like Quicken. So that's why Tighnari really isn't a Bloom or Hyper Bloom character, and also nor a Burning character. Burning doesn't deal as much damage, it also got nerfed a bit, so it isn't that crazy for Tighnari. There are definitely some okay combinations for Tighnari. Thoma, believe it or not, is actually pretty decent right now for a Burgeon team, where you do Bloom, you spawn the cores, and then you apply Pyro, and they explode immediately. That definitely can be a good team for Tighnari, but the characters that you're gonna have to fit in are definitely, again, kind of weird, especially for the Hydro characters. You have Thoma for your off-field Pyro and shielding, and if you have him C6, he does offer a bit of a charge attack buff. But then, what is your Hydro character? Are they that good and useful for Tighnari? Like, we're gonna have to see how theory crafters really work with Tighnari right now. But again, Aggravate is the big one, and seriously, Fischl is just that much broken. So, I don't know how good a Burgeon team really is. I would guess, while it pushes elemental reaction damage quite far, Tighnari's own damage is much more important, and with Aggravate is much more than what those Burgeon reactions do. That's one of the main things that holds Burning, Burgeon, and Hyper Bloom stuff behind on Tighnari teams. As for Cryo, of course, Cryo doesn't react with Dendro, so everybody's out of the picture, which is a damn shame. I would have loved if Cryo had some sort of reaction, because we would have had a lot of supports actually. Right, we would have had, Rosario for the crit rate and stuff. Like, I don't know why we don't have a reaction for that. So what's left is Geo and Anemo. Anemo can't swirl with Dendro, which is also a shame. But that doesn't mean that Anemo characters are completely useless in a Tighnari team. Because Sucrose has EM sharing, which boosts Tighnari's own damage through his talent, plus spread damage and aggravate damage for Fischl. You have Kazuha to get more Electro application, more Electro damage for Fischl, Electro shredding through very decent for Fischl. Like, buffing Fischl isn't a bad idea with how much aggravate she can proc, and how much damage she can deal from that. And, of course, Kazuha has a bit of grouping as well, so that's very decent. Heck, you could put Kazuha in that team and go with Deepwood Memories on him. His skill and burst would constantly proc Deepwood Memories, thus reducing Dendro resistance. So, yes, you lose a lot of swirl damage on Kazuha himself, because Viridescent has the extra swirl damage, and that's really big on Kazuha. But you can run him with Deepwood Memories, why the fuck not? Heck, you can even run Fischl with Deepwood Memories, but I do suggest Thundering Fury for that extra aggravated damage. Kventi is also pretty decent because he has his amazing grouping, and while Tighnari is a bit more focused on single target, because you don't want his homing shots both from his ultimate and his Wraith Arrows to, spread on multiple targets. One or two enemies can easily be, sucked up by Venti and allow Tighnari to actually hit both of them with everything. Like, Tighnari's arrows have a big hitbox, same with his ultimate. They're not extremely single target. So Venti is actually pretty decent. I would say Kazuha is a bit better, because Kazuha is better at single target, bosses, because his burst actually works compared to Venti. But I can easily see someone bringing Venti and Tighnari in a Abyss floor that has lots of enemies, because why not? I think that, again, Venti is pretty decent. He can also carry Deepwood Memories. He can also carry very decent if you want to buff Fischl more. But Kazuha does fit a bit better. So I would say that the order of better is Kazuha over Venti, and that's about it. As for other anemo characters, they just don't really fit because they don't offer something as good as Kazuha or Venti or Sucrose. Because Jan is a healer and mostly builds damaging, so she's not exactly what you need. Sayu also doesn't have the best, like, swirling and stuff like that sort of thing stops them from being as good as the big trio, but also down the levels of how useful they are in a Tighnari team. As for Geo, well, Zhongli is Zhongli. His shield shreds Dendro resistance, so he's perfect. Like a Ganyu team, he allows Tighnari to very freely cast his charge attacks, skill and burst without any sort of problem. He reduces resistance for Fischl herself, so everything is good with Zhongli. He's definitely a perfect ally for Tighnari. 100% recommended if you want to just breeze through stuff, because Tighnari didn't get staggered while he was throwing his 3 charge attacks. And again, the shred from his shield is just his shred from his shield. Like, you can't beat that. Albedo is an interesting one. He has elemental mastery buffing, but it doesn't have it doesn't have a really big duration, and he's sub DPSing. Like, you might actually want to run like Archaic Petra even on him, because you can grab like Electro Crystallize and buff Fischl's damage, but that isn't exactly an Albedo build, so he isn't exactly perfect. There is good, in theory, stuff about putting Albedo in a Tighnari team for the elemental mastery, but he isn't exactly that good compared to, of course, Zhongli with the elemental shred. And really, there aren't any other Geo characters. I guess the Geo MC can be decent because of their crit rate buffs, but they're not a great teammate in general, so not perfect, I would say. You're just compensating for something, I guess, if you put characters like that. And yeah, like, Ningen doesn't fit, Goro doesn't fit, Ito doesn't fit. All of that is just, mostly Zhongli is really the big one from Geo that really gets a big thumbs up for Tighnari teams, I would say. That's it, I guess, for teammates. Again, Fischl is just a god. And there are definitely some other options that you can go for. You can go for a double Electro team to help Fischl more, get some particle generation from the Electro Resonance. Double Dendro is definitely also a team that you can use for Tighnari, but once again, Collei and DMC aren't perfect, aren't really that good for Tighnari, because, yeah, DMC has a bit of elemental mastery sharing himself, but it's like, meh, it's not that powerful compared to, it's not that good and powerful compared to having a Zhongli shield, or some other character that buffs charge attacks or elemental damage and the likes. And Collei just has a small AoE and just doesn't fit with Tighnari as well, so you see where problems lie. So again, Fischl is your main thing, the main character to build like Xingqiu, and there are some more flex slots that you can fill in depending on some general supports. Bennett, right? Bennett exists, right? I forgot about Bennett on the Pyro characters. Bennett doesn't have any like substantial Pyro application to eat up quickens duration, because that does happen. And he's an attack buffer, which Tighnari very much likes, right? It's Bennett, he heals, he has his amazing attack buffs. So he's, of course, very much really good for Tighnari. So, Fischl, Tighnari, and Bennett is, kind of a standard thing. Maybe you can fit in a Zhongli, or, replace Bennett with a Zhongli, and then find someone else. Get a Kazuha. I don't know. But Tighnari is definitely, right now, limited to aggravate teams. And I expect that with more Dendro support releases, that Tighnari will definitely get a bit of a bigger boost, and will also expand his team compositions a bit more. He's also not a character that can act as a sub DPS. He takes too much field time for a sub DPS. He takes low time for a main DPS, but too much for a sub DPS. So you cannot use him as a Dendro sub DPS to an Electro main DPS, let's say. I guess another Electro character, someone like Raiden, to mention, you know, she has off-field electro application and buffs burst damage, but then she also needs her own field time. And you can, I guess, make the argument that, let's say, 3 out of 4 times I'll have Tighnari on the field, and then when Raiden is fully charged, I'll swap her in. That you can definitely do that, but you know, it won't be extremely optimal for Tighnari. I guess if you can go for something like a Zhongli or Bennett, Tighnari, Fischl, and Raiden as a double electro composition for Tighnari. That's definitely a team that is pretty decent, I would say. So, away from team compositions now, let's move on to weapons. We're done with that. Dendro is definitely interesting, although Aggravate and Spread seem like too good. Too good of reactions that kind of completely make Bloom, Hyper Bloom, Burgeon, and Burning kind of irrelevant, with, you know, their Aggravate and Spread are basically Vaporize and Melt. So you're not playing Overload with Hu Tao, right? That's how the Aggravate and Spread feel in front of the other reactions, or the other Dendro reactions. But once again, we have 3 Dendro characters, and we're not getting another Dendro character in 2 patches. Like 3.2 is where Kusanali is coming, and we don't know what exactly she does. So Dendro is looking kind of now. So we will need to get nicely into 3.0's lifespan. The general like version numbers. I'm talking about 3.0 to 4.0. We need to see this whole period to fully judge Dendro and how it ends up being in general. Because right now, again, it's okay. Weapons then. Let's freaking go to weapons. So Tighnari has a few interesting picks for weapons. Unfortunately, though, there is a big problem. Tighnari doesn't have a lot of 4-star and free-to-play options that are really good for him. And 5-star wise, he's also not crazy with them. So he is a bit expensive. He does like a 5-star weapon, and 4 stars can definitely be a bit problematic with Tighnari, and they just don't offer a lot of damage to him. He's not extremely great. There is one exception. The 3-star Slingshot. It's a bow that gives you crit rate as its substat, and gives you a lot of damage to your normal and charge attacks if those normal and charge attacks hit enemies within 0.3 seconds. If that happens, this weapon is extremely good, at R5 of course. But unfortunately, it's a really weird effect to play around. You need to be basically on top of an enemy, and also Tighnari's extra shots from his Wraith Arrow will never proc this. They always take more than 0.3 seconds to hit an enemy because they have a small arc in how they travel. So, while Slingshot is definitely good, I don't expect that people would like to play Tighnari like hugging enemies, basically making him a melee character instead of a bow character. So while Slingshot is amazing when it comes to theory crafting and calculations, I think that in practicality, in action, is not really that fun nor that good. So I would say that most players will skip Slingshot. And that's the interesting one from the 3 stars. And then we move on to 4 stars, where some of these 4 stars do rank below Slingshot in the perfect conditions, but Slingshot most of the time was way below them. So if you want an easier time, let's follow these 4 stars and see how they do. Favonius Warbow isn't for Tighnari because it's an ER bow. He has a 40 energy burst, and he's not that burst heavy. So energy recharge weapons are basically out of the picture, so I'll skip them really quickly. Stringless isn't half bad because it has its EM, and that EM is very nice and useful on Tighnari, and the elemental skill and burst damage that it gives, especially at R5, is definitely very, very welcome and ups Tighnari's damage by a good amount. It ranks very slightly lower than Slingshot, but it's a hassle-free experience. You don't need to do anything specific with the Stringless, so it is definitely a good recommendation. Sacrificial Bow is an ER weapon, so that's a skip. Rust is a normal attack damage bow, of course. It reduces charge attack damage, so it is also not that good. Prototype Crescent is a decent option, but like Slingshot, it is also kind of problematic to use. So Prototype Crescent, you gain extra attack and movement speed when you hit the weak points of enemies. So what's the problem with this thing? Is that first of all, you need to be a good shot and hit those weak spots, else this thing falls a lot in damage. And number two, Tighnari many times goes up against bosses. I said he's a very good single target character. And bosses don't exactly have the easiest weak points to hit. So, you know, Prototype Crescent can definitely fall a lot in terms of damage output because you didn't hit the weak point like once even. So, like Slingshot, it's definitely a problematic bow to use, and it also is, you know, not crazy when it comes to damage ranks, but it's still very decent. Also, it's craftable, right? It's craftable. If you have the bow billets, you can craft it easily. It's very free to play, but again, you will need some good practice with this bow in order to make Tighnari really do a good job. Blackcliff Warbow, while it does have the crit damage and is free to play where you can purchase it with a star glider, the effect is very not good for Tighnari. Yes, Tighnari is the main DPS, but Fischl is also outputting a lot of DPS in these teams, so she can easily steal the kills and steal the stack from the Blackcliff Warbow. Well, steal the kill and Tighnari doesn't get the stack. And it's just a bit of an attack buff, and yeah, that's really the big thing, is that Tighnari most likely will not get the kill. Not only that, Tighnari, as I said, single target character, may go against bosses or 1 to 2 enemies, so how many stacks? You're gonna use that one stack after you defeated the boss on the Abyss? No. So that's why the Blackcliff Warbow stands pretty behind. The Viridescent Hunt is decent because it gives crit rate, but its effect is also kind of meh. You know, it has the Cyclone effect. It does deal a good amount of damage, the Cyclone, and as you refine the Viridescent Hunt, it definitely climbs up in the damage, damage charts because of the Cyclone, but it's not that crazy. It's an okay bow. If you purchase the Battle Pass and you don't need to buy a Serpent Spine or something else, the Viridescent Hunt is decent for Tighnari. Not amazing, but decent if you want, once again, a hassle-free experience from the very specific ways of the Prototype Crescent and the Slingshot. So, again, pretty good. Alley Hunter is for characters that are off the field, like Fischl, so it isn't for Tighnari. The Fading Twilight is a free bow that, if you played when it was out, you got it. It has ER, which isn't a crazy stat for Tighnari, but it's okay. But its effect is definitely really good, where you gain damage. You know, it switches up how much damage you deal every 7 seconds, but it's okay. Once again, like the Viridescent Hunt and other weapons, if you want a hassle-free experience compared to the Prototype Crescent and Slingshot, Fading Twilight is definitely decent and outputs an okay amount of damage for Tighnari. It's not crazy, but it's okay. Windblow Mode isn't half bad on Tighnari. It actually outputs a good amount of damage compared to Slingshot, and also is, once again, pretty hassle-free. It has EM, extremely welcome, and then the effect is that when you use an elemental skill, which you will always do because you want to get that charge attack reduction thing for Tighnari, you gain an attack bonus. So it's actually very perfect for Tighnari, and it deals a good amount of damage. Like, it is pretty high on the damage charts for 4 stars. So if you have the Windblow mode, because you need to be playing from 1.5 or 1.6, I think, to have it, it's okay on Tighnari. Next up is the Hamayumi, the bow that I use on Tighnari. It is actually the one bow that ranks higher than the Slingshot at R5 only, though. So Hamayumi gives you plenty of attack, but has a low base attack. That's fine. But the big one, of course, is that its effect is a budget Amos's bow. It increases normal attack damage and charge attack damage passively, and when your energy is full, which with Tighnari having a 40 energy burst cost is pretty often, this effect, the extra damage on your attacks, doubles. So with Hamayumi, you most likely want to use your 3 charge attacks before you burst when you bring Tighnari in, instead of bursting and then using the skill perhaps, or skill into burst. So you need to, work around that, but it's also like that's not really a hard thing to do with Tighnari. But you need to R5 this thing. Like, you need to R5 this thing in order to deal more damage than the slingshot, even at perfect conditions. So, and it's also, again, pretty hassle-free compared to the slingshot. So, if you have the spare bow billets, I would definitely grab an R5 Hamayumi, slap it on my Tighnari, and watch as he deals an actually really, really good amount of damage. So, yeah, but only an R5. An R1 Hamayumi isn't that great. It still is hassle-free and basically ranks the highest amongst the other 4-star bows. But again, it's what your account has, right? So yeah, R5 Hamayumi, the most recommended for me 4-star out of everything that is fitted for Tighnari. But again, you do you. Next up, because we actually have some more 4-stars. There's Moon's Moon, the gacha weapon from Inazuma. It is an elemental burst damage thingy, so it isn't for Tighnari, because we need some charge attack damage. And then there's King's Squire, the craftable for Sumeru. It has the same stats as Hamayumi, but its effect is actually kind of worse. It does have an elemental mastery buff, but unfortunately it just doesn't output as much damage as basically every other option. It actually ranks pretty low compared to even other 4-stars. The good thing is that it is a free-to-play weapon, right? You can just craft it and have it. But you can also craft Hamayumi, right? So why craft Hamayumi, which ranks much, much higher than King's Squire, than craft King's Squire and basically like make Tighnari deal lower damage, right? Like gimp your Tighnari's damage. So King's Squire, while it sounds good with the attack and the elemental mastery, it unfortunately falls behind basically every other 4-star option. So, and while it looks good as well, I can understand that you want it for the drip. It unfortunately is an actually really, really bad choice. It is the Kazuha weapon for Tighnari, where they give Kazuha so many good looking weapons like the one they give you in Historic Quest, but it isn't at all completely for him. It's the same thing. King's Squire looks good for Tighnari, but unfortunately it just doesn't do it. And then last is end of the line, the fish bow that you can now fish and get. It just isn't for Tighnari at all. It has ER and the effect is an extra attack thingy, an extra bit of damage. It at all isn't for Tighnari, just do not at all. So, let's get into the 5-stars then. Thankfully, basically every 5-star is actually good for Tighnari. Skyward Harp is just a crit stat stick with a lot of base attack. Very, very decent on Tighnari, actually really good just for the stats alone. It's Skyward Harp. I don't think I need to say a lot. So yeah, it's very decent, deals a good amount of damage, and yeah, it actually is on a pretty high damage. It's pretty high on the damage chart when it comes to 5-stars, and you can get it from the standard banner, or if you lose on the weapon banner. So once again, it's actually really good. Very, very good. Amos's Bow. You would think that Amos's Bow having the charge attack thingy, right, will make it really, really good. But unfortunately, it's actually the worst 5-star out of every 5-star for Tighnari's own damage. It still is very good. Nobody will tell you that putting an Amos's Bow on Tighnari is bad. It's still higher than every 4-star. It's just that the other bows have more stats than it, right? The attack, right, it gives a lot of attack. Amos's Bow is a lot of attack. But unfortunately, that doesn't do that much of a crazy thing for Tighnari. Plus, the normal and charge attack damage isn't that high passively. But again, it's very good still. It is very good still. Once again, very highly recommended. But compared to Skyward Harp, where you can get both Amos's Bow and Skyward Harp from the standard banner, the Skyward Harp ranks higher just because of the stats. Elegy for the End. Now, I mentioned that Elegy for the End is amazing for supports for Tighnari. Well, Elegy for the End is amazing for himself. The ER is nice, where actually the ER the Elegy gives you allows you to burst every single time that Tighnari is on the field. And the big one is you have some passive elemental mastery, and then when you trigger Elegy for the End's effect, you gain a bunch of elemental mastery and the attack. It actually ranks very high in the damage charts because of this effect and the passive elemental mastery. Unfortunately, Tighnari can have a few problems triggering it. You might need to get used to his rotations and how you throw out your attacks and skills in order to get the stacks for Elegy for the End to trigger the effect. That's why I would suggest putting some other bow on Tighnari and leaving Elegy for the End for your support. I think that's a better combination than your support not having a good bow and Tighnari having Elegy for the End. Let's say like my situation. I have Ali Hunter, which is amazing on Fischl. I have Elegy for the End, damn that Homa banner, and I have Hamayumi. I give Elegy for the End to my Fischl. She procs it every time, hassle-free completely, and Tighnari just absolutely shreds things with Hamayumi. So I would suggest doing something like that. Like if you have Venti and he's also carrying Elegy for the End, maybe swap him to a Stringless, or, maybe take him out and put Fischl in, like that sort of thing. Trade it around. Trade Elegy for the End around, but again, trade it to your supports, not Tighnari himself. Because, again, for Tighnari to proc Elegy for the End, it's a bit harder, even if Elegy for the End deals a good amount of damage more than even Skyward Harp and Amas's Bow. But I think, once again, your supports will very much more easily proc it, and it actually would fit them more. Fischl loves the energy recharge. Someone like Yelan would love the energy recharge. Any other bow support that we might at some point get would love the energy recharge, I would guess. Heck, even Koli might actually like Elegy for the End as a support for Tighnari. So again, it's a good bow for Tighnari, deals a lot of damage, but I think his supports like it more to buff him crazily, like crazy. So yeah, that's it for Elegy for the End. It's a very interesting bow right now for Dendro reactions. Polar Star, Child's Bow. It's a very good bow, deals a lot of damage, and I think it's actually second behind Tighnari's own weapon, because it gives a lot of attack. You might have a few problems getting all of the stacks that Polar Star can give you, but it's definitely a decent weapon. My problem, that I would say for Polar Star, is that you most likely simped for Child, and you pulled Polar Star for the aesthetics, and because it's Child's best weapon, basically. Right? So, I highly doubt you put Polar Star on Tighnari when you have your God Child, Like, that's the thing with these bows that are coming next as well. They are bows for their characters. They are good on Tighnari, but I bet you simped for that character and you got them an R1 or R5 weapon, an R5 of their weapon for them. You're not gonna switch it to Tighnari. And if you have the money to simp R5 weapons, you most likely are going for Tighnari's weapon, aren't you? So yeah, Polar Star is good, but I expect you are not putting it on Tighnari because it's on your child. Aqua Simulacra, Yelan's weapon, an amazing bow for Tighnari, lots of crit damage. It does, like Slingshot, need you to play to a close range in order to activate its effect, but it actually deals a lot of damage. But once again, I expect this weapon is on your Yelan. Although, I would say you could put Aqua Simulacra on Tighnari and then put an Elegy for the End on Yelan for her to proc it more easily. Right, you'll definitely lower Yelan's damage, but Tighnari will be just going ham. So, think of that, see what you have. I would guess that Aqua Simulacra and staying on Yelan, on your Yelan, and not on Tighnari. But if you are willing, Aqua Simulacra is definitely really good on Tighnari, with the exception on needing to have Tighnari close to the enemies to activate its effect. Thundering Pulse, this is Yoimiya's weapon. It's not that good on Tighnari, unfortunately. While it does have lots of useful stats that actually proc it a bit higher than Amas's bow, just because of the freaking crit damage that it has a bit of passive attack increase, but the thing is, it gives normal attack damage, which Tighnari cannot use. So, once again, I would guess that Thundering Pulse is staying on your Yoimiya, and since it isn't amazing on Tighnari, it's not going on Tighnari. And then last is Tighnari's own weapon, Hunter's Path. It's Tighnari's weapon. It's on the top of the damage charts, and it's Tighnari's weapon. It has a ton of crit rate. It's basically Jade Cutter when it comes to stats. Low base attack, 44 crit rate, so basically you have 50-50 with the 5 base attack that characters have. And then its effect is for Tighnari. Extra elemental damage bonus, and then a huge charge attack damage increase based on your elemental mastery. Here, with Hunter's Path, elemental mastery is definitely even more pushed forward on your Sands of Eon compared to attack, because with other weapons, they are kind of tying with each other. For Hunter's Path, it's EM all the way, nothing else on your Sands of Eon, and a lot of focus on EM on your substats. And that's it. That's it for weapons. That's it for freaking Tighnari. Look, again, I pulled for Tighnari because I didn't want to do Dendro puzzles with Collei or DMC because I couldn't give, like, I don't care about them at all. I just don't care about them. And I think he's fine. Is he crazy for the Abyss? Not necessarily, but I can definitely see people bringing him into the Abyss and doing well. I don't think he's gonna be bad. You're gonna definitely take a bit of time to build him, you know, because he's a new character. You do now have to farm the talents, the artifacts, and such. But again, I think he's actually really good. We don't have crazy Dendro supports for him. DMC will do. I don't think Collei is really that good for him. DMC is a bit better than Collei for Tighnari. But once we go through the whole of Sumeru patches, we're definitely going to see more Dendro characters, and possibly we will see some Dendro buffers, something that will fit Tighnari well, and then you most likely are gonna have Tighnari, that character, Fischl, because once again she is an absolute must, and then some sort of flex like Bennett, Zhongli, and something else. So that's it. We are almost 50 minutes in, and I think that's it for now. Next up, I don't know. We might check Sinnoh, upcoming Sinnoh, because out of the characters coming up, he's the one that kind of I like and would most likely pull. I might actually do a beta review on him because he has some interesting stuff. So we'll see about that if I have the, if I seriously want to do it. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe because it helps the channel a freaking ton. And we're back on the freaking grind, by the way. So, see you in another video soon.